Thank you very much. Well, I'm excited to be here. I've never been to Minnesota. Still haven't, obviously, but I will get there. It's Minnesota or Minneapolis? Minnesota.
Minneapolis, Minnesota, anywhere in the state.
There it is.
We'll count it as
okay.
we'll
Anywhere in there. Okay. I didn't know if we were narrowing it there. What you'll find out very quickly is I'm geographically a moron, and I'm an embarrassment to my wife who has a minor in geography. And if I say something stupid, you'll hear her yell from downstairs, like, really? Because I didn't realize Minneapolis was in Minnesota, but okay, that's great. No, so I am excited to be here. Thrilled to be talking about serverless. I will tell you a lot, just to give you a heads up, a lot of what I'm going to be talking about tonight is going to be SAM oriented, but it applies to some of the stuff at serverless as well. We love at AWS, we love ServerlessMN. We do. We love them as partners. They build a fantastic product. You hear me talk about SAM a lot of times, and yeah, we can have our smackdown sometime, but the reality is either one are fantastic products. And if you're building serverless, tonight's going to be all about serverless. If you're building serverless, you need to use a framework, and these are two of really good ones among several that are out there. So I've asked AJ to interrupt at some point and say, hey, I know you're doing it that way in SAM. Here's how we do it in serverless, so that you get that information, because this is a whatever serverless for everyone, right? This is whatever helps you build serverless. So with that, we'll kind of get started. Hey, can y'all see my screen okay?
Sure can.
All right, this is not going to be an hour of PowerPoint, okay? This is going to be about 5 minutes of PowerPoint, and then the rest of the time watching me fat figure my way through code. So a couple rules when I'm talking, just so you understand, so it helps it out. You can see my picture, hopefully. The rules are not the right guidelines, but if you've never heard me speak, these are some things that'll help. First of all, this is any number I want it to be. Okay, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to hold up this hand and I'm going to say a number, and you're going to be like, that's not 7. But that's what I mean. So you got to listen to what I'm saying, not what I'm holding up. That helps a lot. These are thumbs. I did this, my college ID is this. So, and then these are quotes, not apostrophes. I know that because this looks better than this. Every time I do this, people are like, is he doing a bunny? So I do a lot of jokes. I do one finger jokes. I'm absolutely comfortable having one finger. I believe it is better. I don't want to hurt you there, but I believe that it is really where we're probably headed. But if it makes you uncomfortable, I'm also comfortable with that. So there we go. Either way, I'm going to be okay. So I am glad you're here tonight. I love doing these. I miss getting to just be with people. So enough of that. Let's jump in. Let's get started. So we're talking about managing dependencies, and nothing's working. So now we're going to go again. There we go. There you go. That's me. That's probably way too big of me, but I'm a senior developer advocate for serverless at AWS. I've been a developer since, ready for it, 1995. I'm an old fart, okay? If that was offensive, I apologize, but I am old. I've been doing this forever. I've forgot a lot of code. I'd like to say I've forgotten more than you've learned, but that's not true. I didn't learn a lot to begin with, but I've been a solutions architect. I'm a father of 5. That's not a typo. Their names are 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, because I find that's easiest. I'm a drummer, and I know right now you're thinking to yourself, what? I'll explain that later if we have time. I am a pizza expert. I know what should and should not go on pizza if you follow any of that. And I drink a lot of Dr. Pepper. I'm a pusher of Dr. Pepper, so I am. That's how I make it through most things. All right, so let's get started. Here's our agenda tonight. We're going to begin with the end. What does the final product look like? Then we're going to talk about where do dependencies live. So we're kind of working back from that. And then we're going to do some live demo. All right, so let's jump in real quick. I can't see any hands, but I'm assuming if you're here, you're either building serverless technologies or you're interested in it. Okay, and so I'm going to give you, man, I can talk about dependencies for weeks, right? Oh, I like that. I like the thumbs up. If you're doing it, can you do a little thumbs up on your screen? I don't know if everybody can do it. If you're building serverless, or if you're yeah. I don't know if
you should be able to select the reactions button at the bottom of your Zoom window, and then go ahead and press the thumbs up button.
Sweet. I've never got to use that. Okay, so let's jump in here. Here's the final product. When we look at a Lambda function and we think of dependencies, it really gets pretty easy, okay? Maybe easy is not the right way of saying that, but it gets pretty specific on how you do dependencies in Lambda functions. So let's start with the Lambda. So behold the Lambda. Here we are. Here's a Lambda function. And the Lambda function, there's a lot of things that kind of go into it, but in a basic sense, there's really just a few things that make up a Lambda function. And we could talk concurrency, we could talk, memory and all those kinds of things. But I'm talking about where code lives in a Lambda pretty much breaks down like this, okay? You can have Lambda layers. Actually, let's start with the code first. You have your code, and then you have Lambda layers, and you can have up to 5. That's why I have these 5 there. There's really no further meaning to that. And this is really kind of where your code lives in a Lambda function for the most part. There's some things where we go, well, what about? We'll talk about that a little bit. And when we talk dependencies, and I want to take a minute to jump into this. When I talk dependencies, we can talk about, dependencies are code that my code relies upon. It might be data too, right? So it's data that our code's using, or it's other code that our code's using. Most of what we're going to cover tonight is more about code that our code relies on. Okay, but we will talk about some data as well, or I'll allude to it or refer to it. But again, within an hour, we could go all night, but we're going to try to keep this fairly limited because I do want to get to the demos as well. So when we talk about where dependencies live, we go back to our Lambda function, and dependencies can live in layers. And if you see me looking over here, this is where my screen I'm sharing with it. I feel kind of weird, but that's why I'm doing that. So it could be in the layers, or it can be in the code. And most people start out with their dependencies being compiled or included right into their code. That's usually where we all start out, first of all. When we get a little more past that, we get a little more, advanced, or we try some different things, we start using layers, or sometimes we might even use an Amazon Elastic file system. Now, most of the time, you're going to be within the Lambda itself, but sometimes, based on size, based on how dynamic that data needs to be, your dependencies can live in Amazon Elastic file system as well. So let's look at some of these comparisons. And as I build out these demos, or we look at the demos, I'll explain these more. But some things to understand when you're looking at dependencies is when we package it with our code. First of all, it's easily modified because it's right there in our code, right? We say, okay, look, we have. I'm going to just add another library because I know when I zip up my Lambda function and run it up, it's going to be there. I don't have to do anything special. Again, it's uploaded with each deploy. And it's subject to the 50 megabyte size limit for the zip file for uploading, okay? So you want to be careful with that. If you're starting to add a bunch of stuff to my Lambda function, then we're going, oh, they're gone. All right, the baby's gone. So, but I'm going to keep going. So, all right. So when you do that, you have your 50 megabyte limit size on uploading and a 250 megabyte size on the actual function itself, right? Now that includes layers, that includes everything, but not EFS. We'll get to that in a second. So let's look at layers. Now Lambda layers are modified separately. Generally, you keep them in another place, you modify them. They upload only on updates. So generally, when you update a Lambda function, then you'll upload it, create a new version, and you point your Lambda functions to the new version. And then with that, you're only limited by the 250 megabyte limit because it's not part of your code. It's separated out, right? So you're still limited to the 50 if you have huge layers. So maybe I should add that, but it's not part of the original function on the upload. And then finally, you have Amazon EFS, which is Elastic File System. And again, your code is modified independently. There's no uploading required. You have virtually unlimited size. You can just put a ton in there. But, and this is a big caveat, it requires a virtual private cloud. It requires that it live in a VPC, and your Lambda functions need to be in a VPC as well. Is anybody, and let's do the thumbs again, is anybody using VPC with their Lambda functions now? Okay, a couple of you. All right, but most of us are not. And most of the prototypes I do, when you're in a VPC, that means you've got architecture that you need to talk to that's in a VPC, like an RDS or something else. And so, yeah, so I see you all agreeing with me. And so, but the reality is you'd rather not be in the VPC. Am I correct? Yeah. VPC adds a lot of complexity that serverless kind of steps out of, you know? So, that's something to think about when you're doing dependencies. If I have to add VPC just to do dependency, and not only VPC, but then access for my Lambda function if it needs to access public internet, gateways, things like that, all that networking that we usually don't have to deal with serverless, that's something to think about when we do Amazon EFS. We're not going to do a demo of EFS tonight. We may talk about it a little bit, but I want to show some other things first. So, all right, so we're going to go ahead. Let's jump to the code. And is this font big enough? Can you all see this okay? All right, good. I got a thumbs up. Excellent. All right, so we're going to look at, let me clear this out. Boy, I left a lot up there, didn't I? Oh, my secret's getting out there. All right, so there's a couple of ways. And again, this is going to be very, very SAM-centric. So, AJ, I really want you to jump in if you think, hey, I'm going to throw that in. Because this is kind of how things work with SAM, but it will also talk about some of the principles with just, you know, handling dependencies. All right, in this first example here, I want to show you, I've got a SAM template, and I've got, let me show you the actual template and the application that we're working on. This is literally one of the basic cookie cutter templates that you get when you do SAM and init. And I've updated it and changed some things for me, but all this is it can write and read from a DynamoDB. So our how you doing dependency, that word just jumped right out of my head. Our dependencies are DynamoDB for now. Now we'll add some other ones, or the AWS SDK. We'll add some other ones later. Now I'm not showing it here because I didn't update it, but I don't know if you saw this week. They've now released, if you're a Node developer, you can now import just the libraries that you need. So just the DynamoDB client. That's pretty cool. I'm not smart enough to add it in the shorter time that I needed to add it in this, but no, in all honesty, I didn't get a chance to add it, but I will update this to have it. So here's our simple SAM template, and let's. I'm not going to do a comparison, but if you've used SAM, hopefully this will look familiar. Now I'm going to jump real quick here. We've had a couple of questions. We can be friends just from. Okay, good. Alrighty. Service is someone else's easy. Okay. Alrighty. And why up to 5? Now I'm assuming you are referring to the layers. That is the hard limit. Yes, that's the hard limit. You can do up to 5 layers. And what I've found is most of the time, and you'll see when I'm building out today, most of the time that'll work if you play in your layer strategy, okay? And I really look at layers as global libraries, utility or global SDKs, things like that, utilities, local libraries, things like that. And I'll walk through that when we get there. Let me turn my heater down. It's roasting in here. I'm getting a workout. All right. Okay, so let's walk through the SAM real quick just so you can see. What I've got is I've got my global section. I'm declaring some global stuff, and all I'm really saying, here's my memory size, 256, timeouts 30 seconds. I am passing in, when I create the SAM template, when I create when I actually deploy it, I'm passing in an environment variable called sample table, right? And that sample table is actually being created down here. It is a resource. So I'm referencing that and passing it in as an environment variable to the Lambda, to every Lambda function. You can see it there because that's a global. Now, I'm not trying to teach SAM today, so if I'm going pretty fast, don't sweat it. I've got some links I can point you to. AJ can jump in and show you how to do that on serverless as well. So if this is a little overwhelming, don't sweat it. That's okay. I just kind of want you to know what we're looking at. Okay, so we got 3 different actual Lambda functions. We have a get all items, which retrieves all items from the database. We have a get by ID, which we can pass an ID. And we have a put item, where we can obviously put it. I've already deployed these, so you don't have to sit here and watch me type the wrong commands to deploy. And then we're creating our sample table. And then we have an output that actually outputs the actual, look at that. That's wrong right there. Boom. Where we actually output, because I updated it to HTTP API. If you don't know, if you use SAM, 2 weeks ago, I believe, we updated the SAM CLI to support HTTP API for local development as well. So that was a big win. Very excited for that. Okay, so that's kind of what we're looking at. Now let's look at how we break down the dependencies. In this first example, I'm giving a very basic, what I call an isolated microservice or Lambda function approach. And how I'm doing this is I'm saying that every Lambda function is going to have its own folder. Here's my get all items. And in that folder is my Lambda function code, which is very simple code. Don't hate me for no try catches, things like that. This is just very simple node code that always works. I don't need try catches for my code. It always works. So that was a lie. You just caught me. But just for now, these are happy path here. I am requiring the DynamoDB or the AWS SDK. I'm actually just loading the DynamoDB client as well. This is V2. It's not the newest way, but this will work as well. All his job is he's going to this is the get all. He just scans the database and gets all these. Never do a scan on DynamoDB. This is not a DynamoDB class, so I look at this and go, oh, that's bad. But yeah, I didn't do secondary indexes, but there you go. All right, so the second thing is I have the packages where I'm declaring the dependency AWS SDK. Now, the reason I'm doing this is this keeps everything. I have to, let's talk the pros and cons of this, and I'll show you how this works. Let's do a SAM build so you can kind of see what's going on here. So I'm going to do a SAM build. We're going to do the cache and in parallel. And oh, it's already built. So when all's said and done, you can see here's my 3 Lambda functions. And under each folder is the node modules. Right, here's all the dependencies, right? So in this particular format, if I want to add a dependency to one function, I have to go into that folder and treat it like its own little NPM or Java or Python or whatever. I'm using Node because that's what I do. But this is the same for any of them, okay? Except for maybe Go, which is obviously a little different. The compiled languages are kind of unique on how they work, right? But same instances in bringing in dependencies, okay? So this way, this is the most isolated way, and some would say, well, that's real simple. Some would say, well, that's kind of complex. I don't want to go into every folder. So let's say I have to add a new dependency to every folder. I'm going to need to go in, I'm going to say, okay, let's go into, we'll just go into source, and then we'll go into the put, just for giggles. Okay, put item. And then I would have to do my npm install, let's say Lodash. Okay. So now if I wanted to add that to another one, then I've got to go into each of the folders. So you may like this, you may not. I like this, and I'm going to tell you why I prefer this in a minute, because there's been some changes to SAM. We're getting a little more opinionated on structure. But I like this because it keeps them simple. I can look at them. But I don't like the management aspect. So there's a pros and cons to that. I don't want to have to go into every folder. I want to be able to just do it in one place. And I'll show you that in just a second. However, I want to talk a little bit about why this works for SAM. And AJ, if you want to jump in and see if serverless is the same way as well. With SAM, we've just released several new things. Number one, we've released build in parallel. Number two, we've released cached builds. So we only rebuild. So let's go back to this. Now that I've added that dependency, so let's actually go back. So I'm going to do my SAM build if I can get the right command. Okay, and notice I have my -c, which is cached, and -p, which is in parallel. It's going to build all of them at the same time. It found cache for 2 of them, but it did notice that I picked that one change. So it just used the cache builds for the 2 that I didn't change, and it added and it rebuilt the ones for the one where I changed it. It also did them all at the same time because I told it to do it in parallel. So very handy in that aspect. This, in the next example I'm going to show you, this will not work. Okay, and the reason for that is because it looks at, and I tweet, I don't know if you saw this, but I made a tweet. I said, it's all about the code URI in SAM. SAM, let's go back to our template real quick, and I want to show you. in here, you have the code URI. And I'm actually saying on every function, we grab the application app.js and then the handler function there. So every Lambda function. But in the code URI, I'm getting very specific. And I'm saying the base of my code is in source/get by ID. Now, here's something, again, SAM specific. When you build SAM, SAM takes the root of that code URI, picks it up, drops it in a temporary directory, does all the work, and then copies the artifacts to the code. So what that means is anything above that directory is not available. No bueno. Okay, so that's really important to understand if you're using SAM and some of the other toolings. And AJ, does serverless work that way as well? You're muted, buddy.
Sorry. Great question, Eric. Yeah. I'm glad you asked. It can. It has, by default, it will include everything in the directory and lower of a serverless.yaml file. So like the project directory. However, you can, like a code URI path, we have like an include and exclude for packaging. You can exclude it. But a lot of people do that inadvertently because they're setting up something like Webpack, you know, or something, inadvertently exclude their dependencies. So while we may have made a different architectural decision, I would almost be able to give a talk on the number of times that's bit people. So like those decisions have consequences. Absolutely. But we do have something similar. If you want to, people would like to get a lot of performance tuning out of things like Webpack and specific packaging. And that has this exact problem where you're specifying exactly your dependencies. And now everything that lives at that higher level is omitted. So.
Okay, yeah, and that's a really, and for my recording, it wouldn't have picked you up, so I'm going to recap that a bit. But serverless does have the ability to kind of go up the folder because I guess it does it all in the same place. But you have the ability to block or add or remove files there, and you can do that using the npm on SAM as well. But what we found is a lot of people get confused by that, and so what they end up doing is all their tests are bundled in, all their everything, you know, is bundled into their Lambda function. In the way I'm doing this here, only, and if we look under AWS SAM build, we go into these folders, only the code, the package file, and so this could be requirements in Python, whatever, and then the required modules. Right, and I'm not doing any kind of Webpack. I can also obviously bring that a lot smaller using Webpack, things like that. I don't do Webpack, and I'm going to tell you why in a few minutes. So mostly because I don't build. Most of what I'm doing are smaller projects, proof of concepts, architecture, things like that. But Webpack's great, but sometimes I don't want to wrestle it. So, but I did do. If you're interested in doing Webpack, you do know building in Sessions with Sam, which is a series I do every Thursday, except for it's on pause right now because of reInvent. I do a whole session on how to do Webpack right in SAM, and serverless I know has some Webpack plugins as well that make that work. So all right, so hopefully that makes sense in this. What we've done here is the first pattern of dependency management is to separate those into their own folders, and with that, here's the other thing that counts with SAM. So we talked about the cache builds. The cache builds, and I'll show you in the next one, won't work if they're not separated in folders, and the code URI needs to point to that folder. The other thing is in SAM, if I've got 300 Lambdas in a template and I change one, if you've been the person that pushed that and all 300 rebuild, and you're like, why is this doing this? That's why right there. Okay, so you want to isolate those. This will help you isolate those functions. So SAM really, like I said, is becoming more opinionated, and this is not the exact structure that I'm tending to recommend. We'll get there in a minute, but this is a good starter to isolate those. Now, you may say to yourself, you know what, Eric, I really don't worry about the cache builds, things like that. What's more important to me is how to manage these dependencies, right? I don't mind that I don't want to have to go into my 4,200 Lambda folders and add these dependencies that I made up a number. Did you guys hear that? So not only is this any number I want, but then I make up numbers. But I want to be able to manage that in one place. Okay. Well, we can do that. So in the second example, and here's something I learned early. I'm going to close all these files and get in the right directory, because if I don't, I'll launch the wrong thing, and it's mayhem. So Bear with me one moment here. If you've watched, if you've seen me in some other sessions where I'm using Visual Studio Code, which I've mainly moved to Cloud9 now, but Visual Studio Code, I have to use the ZSH profile plugin, if you're not familiar with it, because I have been known to deploy serverless applications when I was a contractor to the wrong customer. So I have myself gated using, I have to use profiles, things like that. In Cloud9, it's only this profile. So, all right. So in example 2, let's clear this out. Let me show you how I've set this up. In example 2, we're going to look at the structure of the template again because there's a change. This time, notice I'm not doing my handler across all the functions. I'm saying every function is going to be located in the root. Okay, so just I can actually leave this blank and it'll assume that the code URI is the same place as the template file. But this is important to know. Every function is going to look at is going to be based from the root. Now, what this means is that SAM will say, okay, I'm going to take everything in that code URI and I'm going to use that to do the builds. Okay, so at the function level, now I'm saying the handler is at source, then get all items.js. Okay, so that paths me to the handler. So let's look at what that does when we build that. So again, I'm going to do SAM build minus P minus C. Okay, so I'll build some of that's changed. Okay, so now I can look in here and notice we've still got the same thing, because remember, our ultimate target is they're going to be separate folders with all. That's the only way Lambda can get those when we're rolling dependencies in with code. So it's important to understand at the end of the day, all my dependencies have to go with that Lambda function unless I use a layer or EFS. All right, so if I look in here though, let's look what happened. I've got my events. These are my test events. I've got all my node modules. That's good. And I've got every source file. Now I can get picky. Okay, I can add an exclude folder, and that's a good idea. If you like this, then make use of your exclude files. And SAM has some exclusions that it can do, where you can say don't add. But then you got to get real specific with it. You say don't add get all items and put items, but add. And so this gets a little clunky in my opinion. But if I want to add a dependency, because my what we call the manifest file or the dependency file is in the root, all of my functions have access to this. Okay, so you see the difference on how I'm doing that management. Okay, one's isolated, and then the other, of course, is we can have those spread across all the functions. This works, and this is how I usually, or this is how I used to do it all the time. This does not work. Let me show you real quick here. Okay, so we're going to do a build on cache. Okay, notice how the cache is invalid. I didn't change anything, right? It's going to come up invalid each time, okay, because it doesn't know, it doesn't have those separated by the code URI. All right, so now the next one I want to show you, now we're going to get into layers, and this is going to be less SAM specific, and this is going to be Lambda. Show me with your little thumbs. How many of y'all are using layers now? All right, not many of you. Okay, a couple of you. Well, when I'm done here, you're probably going to go and delete every stack you have in serverless and convert it to layers. I think that might be boastful. I might be, but I'm just throwing that out there. So I am a fan of layers. This is a preference thing. There are some who say, nah, layers don't get me anywhere. I think they do. Number one, you don't have to upload your code every time. Okay, it's gonna be pulled in. So let me explain how a layer works. When I upload my code to AWS, either on a create or an update, it's going to go grab any layers I have associated. It's going to grab those layers and pull the actual code. It doesn't link. It doesn't point to. It actually pulls that code over into the Lambda function. And then your Lambda function has everything it needs. If someone deletes that layer up here, your code's still good. Now, the next time you deploy or update, then that may not be there. You may have to update your layer, things like that. And that becomes troublesome, but there may be a reason why it was deleted, and there's some things you can do about that. So let's look at an example. Let me close these out again. And I'm going to talk about, I'm going to walk through how I like to break down my applications and how I like to use layers. So let's go to example 3. And real quick, cold starts and layers. Thoughts on cold starts and layers. So the only effect, okay, let's take extensions out for a minute, okay? If you're familiar with extensions, we're going to take that and put it out for a second. The only effect a layer is going to have on a cold start is if you're pulling in a lot of things. It's size of it, things like that, and there's a lot of interactivity with that happens before the handler, right? So you want to be cautious of that, but it's not going to have. Other than that, it's not going to say, hey, if I've added a layer, I've automatically added 10 milliseconds. No, that's not true. It really depends on what's going on. So it's very kind of negligible. And again, just like the function without a layer, it's how you handle your function, right? If you're any Java developers in the room, you don't have to raise your thumbs. But if you are, there's a fantastic presentation by Stefano Bugliani where he talks about, so not a Java developer, and you're going to quickly realize that when I start talking here in just a moment. You're going to go, whoa, that guy's not a Java developer. When Java starts up, it does some reflections. I think that's the right word. It does some reflection, and it does a lot of its dependency gathering at instantiation, right? And that's where a lot of cold starts happen with Java. And there are some tricks you could do where all that happens and is bundled before you deploy that application. So everything the Java application needs is right there. If you're dealing with Java and you're dealing with cold starts, I highly suggest you watch that. Look for reInvent Stefano Bugliani Java, and I'll try to find a link and add it in a little bit. So, all right. So let's get into layers. So this is example 3. All right. I don't know why I did that. Let's do that. Okay. All right. So let's look at the template in this. Layers are really cool because, one, they work in the globals. I don't mind you seeing my account number. This is all going away. You're welcome to link to this if you want, but if you redeploy, it'll be gone the next time. So notice this says, and I love doing this, and you can't actually see it, but this is a Cloud9 instance solely for this meetup. So special for y'all. All right, so here with layers, what I've done is I've got 2 layers. I'm going to show you how to manage those layers in just a minute, but I've got 2 layers I've created. The first layer has AWS SDK. Okay, it's my AWS SDK for Node. The second layer has my Node utilities. And for me, that's numeral, Lodash, and I think I added moment. Okay. And so those are some different utilities. You may or may not use this, but for example, right? So, oh, good. Nice job, AJ. Hey, he gets paid tonight. That's good stuff. All right. Yeah, that's a fantastic video. So what's going to happen is, and this order matters. Okay. So let's say in this first one, this guy right here, let's say I load up AWS SDK version 2.4.1. And then this one, I load up 2.4.3. Now, why I would do that doesn't make any sense. But if I did, the closest one, the furthest one down is going to take precedence. All right. So I'm going to get 2.4.3. Those are random numbers. I'm making those up. So real numbers, not real versions. So that's important. So if you have same library in multiple layers, the closer one's going to override. Okay, the further one down to the bottom. All right. So in this particular function, I've moved. Now, if you go in here, and I'm going to show you the source. And in here, if you look under this app, okay, the code doesn't change. Although I did add one little line to make use of numerals so you would believe me. And I'll show you that in just a minute. Now, I know what you're saying right now. You're saying, Eric, you still have a package.json file in there. And you're right. You're right, I do. Let me show it to you. It's empty. I have no dependencies in here. Okay. And here's why I did this. First of all, Sam has to have a manifest file in there. And I'm talking to him about that. I don't think, especially if we move off to layers, but it has to have something. It'll blow up if requirements isn't there or JSON or the package. So that's just an idiosyncrasy of the actual SAM tool. So just that's the only reason why that's there. There's no dependency whatsoever. Now, what's going to happen here is each of these are going to get the AWS SDK from this layer and the node utilities from this layer. And then I'm going to actually show you, let's make it happen. All right. So I'm going to do something here. Let's build this. SAM build minus P minus C. Okay. All right. So we're good there. Now I'm going to do a SAM local start API, and I'm going to pass in the variables. This is called my locals file. This is the file I made. I'll show that to you in a minute. Obviously did not type the right thing here. Where am I? Example 3.
I think you want locals.json.
Whatever. These serverless guys, they know everything. Whatever. That was good. It was a good call out, though. I'm going to have to give you points on that. But that balanced out you posting the link. But no, I'm just kidding. That was great. Thank you very much. All right. There we go. Yes. All right. So what this did is I've started up a local version of HTTP API. Right. I passed the locals file because the locals file holds all the information to resources in the cloud. All right. So there's a lot of questions on, hey, how much should I emulate locally? And this is one of the things with SAM and serverless, I think, does a little more local emulation. SAM, we are big believers in bringing the developer to the cloud, not the cloud to the developer. We don't, and I'll tell you here's why, because Eric is not smart enough to figure out Docker Network. That's just the honest truth. I can't get I can't get my environment to talk to DynamoDB local or, all the different, so what we really encourage you to do is test in the cloud, right? And so all this does say, hey, these are since they are passing in variables and those are up on the cloud on the Lambda function, here they are locally so you can use them as well. And my credentials will allow me to develop against DynamoDB in the cloud from my local database. So let's actually see that happen. So I've got that started. So let me just pop up another one. We're going to get crazy here. New terminal. And we'll pull it down here. And we're just going to CD into that example. Okay, CD. Oh, with dependency. There we go. I just moved it all today. So, all right, example 3. Now, I don't even need to be in there for this, but I will anyway. So I'm going to curl localhost :3000. And I've hit the database. And there I got my answer back. Now, remember, numeral is in the numeral is in the layer. So a couple of things happened. First of all, it grabbed that AWS SDK, which I already had cached, so it skipped the download, and it made a local version of the layer. It also downloaded the utilities one. It skipped it because I already had it. And it makes it as if in the cloud, how these layers, it puts a Lambda together, much like it does in the cloud. So a lot of the pushback I get from layers is, well, yeah, but how do you develop locally? Well, you can set it up so that your layers are local. And I hope I'm not putting you in a spot. I think serverless does this as well, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I have a few things to add, but I want to let you finish your thought for then I can add some color for the framework.
Please do.
Sure. So I'd like to first off wholly recommend Eric's approach to testing in the cloud. We do support offline plugins, and there's a whole bunch of them, but Bryson pointed out there's been some discrepancies. I've ran into the same things with serverless offline. It is not a critique of any of the offerings available for local emulation. The truth is that the people that are building these services in not just AWS, but any cloud provider are moving very, very quickly, and you want to take advantage of these things. Yep. So to do that, one of the beautiful parts about serverless infrastructure is that generally it's pay per use. So we provide all of the tools you need to get every developer to have their own stage, their own instances of this data. In addition to things like even feature branches is something that we've been even pushing, and we're doing it and kind of evangelizing internally. So when I'm going to work on a new feature, I'll actually check out a feature branch and I'll stand up infrastructure for that feature that I think I'll need. And I'll reference using outputs, which is a similar feature to what Eric described in SAM. I'll reference those to include the things I don't want to emulate at all. And what you effectively get is your own branch deployment in a real cloud environment in AWS that talks to cloud provisioned resources, like say, for example, Dynamo table. I can spin up my new version of a Lambda function that talks to an existing table. Highly recommend going that route. The serverless framework does have all the things you need to run stuff offline and locally, but those are community projects, at best effort, and will never be as fast as the people that are building those products. That's just not possible. So I would highly recommend and echo Eric's statements. Do everything you can and engage your development team to operationalize on the cloud itself. Big plus one there, Eric.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. You will save yourself a lot of headache, and you will say, that Eric and AJ, they know what they're talking about. You will say it just like that, and then you will send us money and Dr. Pepper. But no, it saves you a lot of headaches. And I love it, as AJ was talking about, these different environments for the developers. I've seen folks set up a single account, one environment, different developers using aliases or versions or weird extensions and naming and stuff like that. It's a nightmare. Some simple development rules: one, bring the cloud bring the developer to the cloud. Two, use your own environments. We suggest your own account. You guys break it down, I think, by account or by environment, but it's still broken out environment by itself.
Yeah, absolutely. I do recommend developers should have their own accounts under the AWS organization, in specifically the AWS ecosystem. If you're in that world, if you're in a Azure or a GCP world, we can talk after the meeting. I can give you some thoughts there, but AWS specifically has really good tools to manage those. And one thing that I learned from having beers at reInvent with a couple of folks that worked at AWS was like, we get accounts that just automatically delete everything every 2 weeks. And I think if you can automate that sort of thing, that's a pretty high bar to aim for, but I like that a lot. It makes it really easy as a developer for you to try new things. And if you're in this group, you're an engineering leader or manager, maybe, a people manager, not an IC, it helps you and your team empathize with new developers on your team. So there's a two-part win there. That second part, I think, is actually kind of valuable too.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. And the other thing I'd point out on this, if you look at my template, and I know you do this with serverless templates as well, you'll find very rarely, and usually I have a good case or I just wasn't thinking, I don't name any of my resources. They are auto-generated, they are unique, and I reference them internally. I never try to hard code a name and reference those, much like going back to, so then I don't have naming collisions, things like that. But going back to this, and we have a question here from Ibrahim where it says, sorry for the question, no apologies for the question, but how do you decide to pick something to be your layer? Is it arbitrary? Or is it a library or what? So I'm going to answer this, and that is the sweetest background. I literally thought you were in a data center. I was like, whoa, that's cool.
No, it's very.
How did you? Yeah, that's awesome. So there are AWS guards chasing you right now. So anyway, but I'm going to answer that because I think people do their different strategies. But this is the first phase of my strategy. And in my next example, I'm going to show more. But in my first phase, I have a layer separate. I load my SDK. And I might even combine my SDK and my well-worn, always used libraries. I know I always use these. Boom, there they are. I separate them sometimes because sometimes I may just be doing SDK. So SDK first. Then I'll load my Lodash, I couldn't even name, Boto 3, but I couldn't name a Python requirement because I'm a Node guy. But the next one, and I'll explain this. So we've shown that we've got our conversions. So in this example here, I'm showing that the SDK is present because we talked to DynamoDB and we got information right here. I'm showing that the library that we had in the second layer is present because we use the conversion tool to format the number, right? So simple examples, but you get an idea. So let's go to our third one. And here, and this is an example 4. Now, what this one does, and this is one that I do, some may like, some may not. I like, so I did, I didn't rename this. This is internal layers, okay? Hang on a minute, do I have the right template? Give me 1 second here. Is that example 4, example 3, boy, you put all this work into it, look what happens. All right, so there's that one. So now I'm gonna go to example 4. See what I'm showing in example 4. I hate it when they open up down there. That's probably my problem. Okay, here we go. All right, yeah, it just opened. You probably all saw it, and we're like, what's wrong with him? So in Cloud 9, sometimes it'll open. One time it opened up on our microwave upstairs. It's, I don't know where these are, but they have these really weird things. So what I'm going to do in this one is, a lot of times we have, like we talked about, we have these dependencies that we're going to use everywhere. Now, one thing, let me show you how I'm managing those layers real quick. I'm actually using SAM, of course, to manage layers. And in my template here, there's a couple things I'm doing. I'm declaring what's called a layer version, and I'm setting it to build for Node.js. And then I'm doing a permissions, and I'm restricting access to this layer. So I told you, you guys can pull that layer if you want, but you're not going to get it. I restrict it. You have to be in this account to get to this layer. Now, I could go down to this here. Let me go and set the principal to be a star and say anybody can get it. Or I can set it to an organization. Or I can set, there's different ways that I can set the principal. But as always, we do least privilege, right? You build least privileges, even with our layers. We try to lock those down as much as we can. So you have to be in my account to use this layer. And that's fine the way we're building this out. So something to know about that. And so all I have to do, notice when I'm managing my layers, if I go into my Node SDK, you were probably expecting a bunch of stuff to be installed and ready, but all I have is the manifest file. And I can go in here, if I go to, actually I've already built it so you can see it. I can, no, I haven't. So let's go into generic layers. I can do SAM build and tell it to build out my layers as well. And under the AWS SAM, here's my 2 layers. There's my Node SDK and everything you need. And here's my Node utilities and everything you need. Okay, so those, then I can do a SAM deploy, and now my layers are out there, and it'll kick out the layer version for me because I have it in outputs. All right, so that's how I manage my layers. And I may have a layer of all my SDKs that I'll push. Now, one limitation of layers is you have to be in the same region on your Lambda function that the layer is in. Okay, so if you're doing a layer that's going to be global, you need to push that to each region that it's going to be called from. Which is very handy with profiles using serverless or SAM. You can have profiles of where you're deploying that. All right, so let's look at this one. Now, I'm going to add a 3rd layer, and I'm calling it local libs. Now, this local libs is just libraries that I'm going to use in this application. All right, so I'm managing that local libs in this application. And I know some people, oh, layers should be across all things, but why not just manage it here? Okay, so what I'm doing is down at the bottom, as I have a new layer, much like we've seen, there's no permissions, okay? And oh, hey, hang on, Eric. So SAM will automatically wire those up for you because I'm creating the layer here and I'm referencing the functions, so it'll automatically wire that up. And I'm also setting my retention policy to delete because I always want the newest. What's going to happen is every time I deploy, it's going to grab the latest version of this layer every time I deploy or update. Okay, so now I have this local libraries, and in that local libraries, notice it's just a package file again. I'm loading UUID, which is just a node. You generate a UUID for that. So what I can now do is I can go, let's get my terminals up and running up again here. So I'm going to go to CD example 4, and then I'm going to do SAM. Let's build it just in case. Okay, and I'm going to do SAM local start API, and I'm going to pass in the locals file again, and JSON. Okay, not .com. Oh, hey, already used. Yeah, that's my bad. Okay, there you go. If you do any kind of spa building, things like that, you know what I'm talking about. Let's see, you try to launch multiple servers. You know what I'm talking about. Y'all are judging me right now, but you know what I'm talking about.
Every day I do this.
Yes, it's like, what? Where's that running? I have to restart my machine. So okay, so we're gonna get into that real quick here. Example 4. That way we can do it. So I'm just gonna do SAM local start API, same command. All right. So there I've got there. Now I'm going to curl that. Localhost 3. And now in this example, I'm showing some other things. And I'm actually there's my UUID. So I've got my conversions. So to answer your question, is where do I put these? So I'm layering these primary ones that I'll share across multiple applications, multiple things. Utilities that I use everywhere. Those are available to my account everywhere. Applications specific to, layers or utilities, libraries, let me try that again. Libraries specific to this application, I have internally to this application. I create a layer. Now, what this gets me in Node, at least, I don't have to Webpack. I don't need to go and gather all that because all I'm doing is managing my dependencies in that one location. So it goes back to earlier where we were talking about, all right, I want to spread these into multiple folders, but I don't want to manage dependencies in multiple places. Now I've isolated my dependencies in a local layer and I've kept my folder separate. So my cache is going to work, my parallel is going to work, and my recognition that's already been built is going to work. All righty. So hopefully that's turning some light bulbs on. This makes it a lot easier for me to say, that's how I'll manage my layers. So let's take it a step further. We okay on time, AJ?
Oh, we're doing great. Keep it up.
All righty. Oh, okay. All right. So I'm going to kill this because it'll blow up later and I won't remember that. So let's go to example 5. Okay. All right, so in example 5, we're going to take this one more, and now I'm going to add what I call my abstractions. Okay, these are some local not libraries. Now you can divide these how you want, but these are some local utilities that I like to use. Okay, so in this example, now if we go in here, first of all, I want to show you the template, and not that one, the abstractions. I'm creating another layer called abstractions. And this one looks a little different. If you notice on this, I've got a build method and I want you to build it as if it's a node library, right? But on this one, I'm saying, I'll just give you the structure because I don't have a build method. I want you to take the structure that I have and drop it somewhere, okay? And in this structure under the abstracts, there's 2 things. I have an actual, just a simple node file. I can do a class, I can do whatever I want. And it's just exporting a function called generate. And I want it to generate a random color. Now, the colors I'm going to save in my data folder called colors.json. Blue, red, fuchsia. I don't think I spelled fuchsia right, but we'll see. Pink and yellow. Those are my colors, right? Now, here's the interesting part. You can see it here. Notice how I'm referencing it. If you're a node developer or any language, it's under the opt folder. So I could say /opt, anything there is going to be in that root. Java, Node, Python, doesn't matter. And so everything comes from the opt folder. If it's built as a library, like if I do that build method node, then it's going to automatically know to look to node, the node folder. As if the library maintenance that Node has or Python, however they structure their libraries and the default locations. But if I don't, then it's going to just drop it in the root of that opt folder. So let's see this in action. So in my app, I've changed my app just a little bit here. And there we go. My machine's slowing down. So get all items. We look in the app here. This time, I'm going to actually load. You see where I load UID? I'm loading that function. I'm calling it color, and it's require opt color generator.js. Direct load of a class, a module, however you want to do it. Then down here, I'm going to say color.generate, and it's going to actually generate a color. So let's start this up here. So we can just go to start local here. And then we'll just do a curl once that's running. It's building that image, okay? And there you go. Color is fuchsia. Doesn't mean I spelled it right, it just means it's in my list. So, okay, any questions on that, okay? Yeah, there we go. Any questions on how that works, okay? So again, back to the question, dependencies using layers, primary, we use everywhere, but then I can manage layers right locally and data locally. Now, you may not always want to do that, okay? You may be saying, data is probably, and again, you can see why we didn't get to it time-wise, but data is, if you have large files that need to be changed a lot, EFS is the way to go, right? Or S3. That's if we've done serverless at all, we know that asynchronous, we could drop files into an S3, trigger a Lambda function, and off we go, right? Rarely do we need our Lambda to be up and running and call that data from EFS, but sometimes we do. Sometimes we do. And so this is a EFS a great way to do that. All right. Any questions on that? Anybody, real quick show of hands, anybody see themselves using this? Okay.
I guess I'm surprised because I think I've been in serverless maybe for a year or so. This is the first time I hear layers.
Okay.
I don't know where I've been reading or watching. I'm sorry, but
no, don't apologize.
Yeah, this is the first time I hear about layers.
Well, hopefully this will open up a world to you. Layers makes life easier in dependency management, and this is it's a recommended AWS recommended way. Now, sometimes it doesn't work. Some people go, you know what? I just want those right in there. What works for you works, right? But what you want to do is how much heavy lifting, what we call it at AWS is undifferentiated heavy lifting. How much of that can we get out of the way? So what I've done here by isolating my dependencies into separate layers and only I kept the ones that I need to update often, I kept them as part of the application where I can push those changes out immediately. The ones I don't change very often, I kept in a separate project that I can upload as needed, and those will be versioned, right? So then what I no longer have to use, if you're a node developer, I no longer have to use Webpack. I still could. There might be some good reasons too if you want to start decreasing that. I don't care about it because none of my Lambda functions really get that big. But if you're running larger ones, obviously Webpack's a great thing. All right, we got our statement here. The thing I love about layers is it makes it possible to edit code in AWS console and get immediate feedback with okay, yeah. And the new console gives you some flexibility there to do that as well. Yeah, very true. Okay, so I have one more example. I need to set. To be honest, I don't remember what I was showing on this, so let's go real quick here. Oh, yeah, okay. This is, if you follow Ben Kehoe, who is Ben Key, and most of you know that name, or Suspender Guy, there's all kinds of, Ben and I got in, not really a debate, we were conversing over this on file structure. Another way to do this, and you may or may not like this, is a single file. Right? So you may not want to manage. So what I'm going to do is go in here and show you. The template looks exactly the same, but what I'm doing is I'm saying every function is going to be located under source, and the handler is going to be app.getAllItems. The next handler is going to be app.getById. And what this does is this allows you to have one file with all the different handlers in it. And this is another way, and so all my dependencies are there, but you'll notice when I build it out, do I get one function? I don't. I still get them all separated out, right? If I'm using SAM build, but these are all different Lambda functions when it's said and done, right? The other way, and I've seen folks get into where we have one handler and we'll call different functions based on what that handler is doing. That works, and I've built that plenty of times. But what you start getting into there is monolithic lambdas, right? A monolithic lambda function, because what happens is you end up with 700 lines of code on a good day in your lambda function. And my encouragement to you is, man, Lambda functions are microservices. They should do one thing and do that one thing really well. And they should be decoupled from everything else, right? So that's where your SQS and your event bridges and your SNSs and kinesis and all those kind of things come in. And with that, that's what I've got there. So let me give you a little more data here real quick, and then I'm going to open it up for questions. So we've done that. I want to encourage you, and AJ, I'm going to connect with you to get this video if we can. I've got my copy of it here, but it's missing some of the conversation, and I'll post it up on Serverless Land. If you're looking for a lot of content, all of my sessions with Sam, all our event bridge, everything the DA team does, we post to serverlessland.com. This is a QR code. You can grab it. And so I really encourage you to check that out. And like I said, and then the other one is and the Serverless Land will link to it, is our Serverless Land YouTube channel, which I don't have a link to on here, but we link to it from Serverless Land. And with that, a reminder, if you have questions that aren't getting answered, you can find me on Twitter at EDJGeek. Some people call that Edge Geek. I don't care. I've been called worse. And so feel free to hit me. I'm not always immediate, but I try as best I can to get back to you as soon as I can. But Man, I openly admit I do not know everything, but I know the people who do. So I'm glad to ask the question for you, or just tell you straight up, well, we don't know, but we'll figure it out. So with that, I want to open up any questions that we might have that I didn't cover, and glad to help out. Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it all. And feel free to just come on and talk through the mic if you want. You don't have to type it. I'm pretty casual.
Sorry, if you can't unmute, let me know in the chat. I believe I clicked the button that said allow everybody to unmute, but I want to make sure if someone's trying to voice a question, I'd really like to make sure you get heard. It looks like we have one in chat.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, can you share your Twitter handle?
Yeah, I'll put it in here. He's got it right there above, and I'll add it again, is EDJ Geek. There you go. It's in the chat.
Beautiful.
All right, re-upping my question, so I missed it. If I were to use EFS, do I still drop stuff in the opt folder? No. So with EFS is going to mount wherever you want it to be. So you can actually just like /mount /EFS, and you'll actually, when you connect that, and I'm going to grab a, while we're talking, I'm going to grab a link where my buddy James, who is James Beswick. If you follow Bezic, I'm sorry. Oh man, that's recorded too. Bezic, he does bad. I call him worse. He does a great presentation on EFS on my sessions with Sam, and so I'm going to grab that. And there's also a blog on it. So I'm obviously having a hard time getting to my. There we go. All right. So real quick, let me grab this link. I'm just going to in fact, I'm just going to put this link in here. If you'll go to s12d.com/sessions with Sam, that will take you to the Sessions with Sam on YouTube. And in there is an EFS, an entire session dedicated to EFS, including the code to make it work for you. Right. So when you connect the EFS to the Lambda function, you'll give it a mount point, and then you'll just reference that from within your code. Best way to do that is to pass it in as an environment variable. All right. So if it is a file ref, then the node module refs are going to be the file path references. So node modules have a special place in a Lambda function. Any of the languages have a special place, and those are going to be under opt/node/ and then you'll have versions. So they could end up in node itself if it applies to anything, or node.js 12x, 10x, whatever. Those, and so when your Lambda function looks to reference those, it knows, because it's node, it knows to look in those. The opt folder is your kind of go-to to drop things in if you want to. You also have a /temp folder. If you grab stuff from S3, you can drop it in S3 or that temp folder. It won't be there when you come back, so don't expect it to be there. That temp, this temp really means temp in Lambda functions. And then with the EFS, you mount that anywhere. I mean, you could call it /EFS, and then in your code, you would reference it as /EFS /file name. However you want to do. Hopefully that answered that question. What other questions? You bet. Glad to answer them on mic or in text. I'm adding another. This is a direct link to the repository for a lot of the SAM stuff that has that as well. So. All right, well, AJ, I'm going to turn it back over to you. I don't see any other questions, but I'm going to hang out if there are any more.
I got a quick question for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Dylan.
So if you're deploying kind of like in a CI/CD framework, and you're trying to like do everything out of Git, what are the tools that you're going to use to do your SAM deploys through that?
All right, so I'm going to give you two answers. Okay, the first one I'm positive. The second one I'm starting to work on. Okay, which I shouldn't tell you, but I'm a spill the beans kind of guy. So first one. So what I would generally do if I'm using SAM, serverless is the same way in this one. AJ, correct me if I'm wrong, but quietly and nicely. So what you're going to do is you're going to use, if I'm using AWS code tools, like code build, code pipeline, things like that, but this is the same with Jenkins or a Hudson or something like that. What you're going to do is you're going to build your artifacts just like you do locally. code build, what I'm going to do is SAM will probably be installed already. I might have my own image that has it or in some of the new ones. SAM will be installed. I'm going to update it to the version I want. I'm going to pin that version, however. So, and then I'm going to load my dependencies. Let's talk Node for a minute. I'm going to do my npm I, and then to install everything. Then I'm going to run some tests and obviously kick out if they don't work, or compiling if I need to compile before I do tests. Then the last thing I'm going to do with SAM is I'm going to say SAM, I've built it already. I'm going to say SAM, package. And what SAM package is going to do is it's going to take my artifacts, drop them in an S3 bucket. Okay. Then it's going to update my actual cloud or my SAM template and with the code URI that changes that location. Okay. Then it's going to pass that template back to code pipeline or whatever I'm using. Okay, that's my artifact. Then I'm going to invoke CloudFormation. I'm going to do a change set. Then I'm going to do an execute change set. Now I can also, and when I did serverless, I think serverless has changed now, but when I did serverless before, and I did used to use serverless, I can deploy right from code build if I want. So I can tell code build using serverless, I can do SLS deploy or SAM deploy. And so, but the problem with that, and here's why I don't like that as much, is I lose some visibility to the CloudFormation steps in code pipeline if I'm using code pipeline, right? So because those are different stages in my pipeline. So I lose a little visibility. I like them broken out. That's just personal preference, but that's a CI/CD. Was I right on the serverless stuff still?
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. We do offer serverless package is the
yes.
command that lets you do that. And you'll see that fully generated CloudFormation file along with the actual code packaged and ready to go. You can do one command I don't hear a lot. One command I didn't hear a lot of it. SLS print is something we support, which will just show you the resolved CloudFormation file without actually running the package, which isn't
slick.
Exactly. Yeah, it's kind of neat. Yeah, it's especially neat when you're referencing outputs and things like secrets from either serverless platform or if you're using SSM or any other way to manage secrets or any sort of environment variables. SLS print lets you do that without the package step. It's just like a faster, method you can call, but very, very, very much similar in that step. As far as like code pipelines has that CloudFormation step, you could, run SLS package or print there at that step. But yeah, Eric's right. Like the downside is the CloudFormation step is sort of bundled in that very, very last build step. So it's sort of separate out.
It's a little harder to debug, very honestly. Yeah, if it blows up on you. So that's one of the reasons I like. So number 2, and I haven't played with it yet, but it's on my list. It's a very long list. Is GitHub Actions. And I know that some folks have written some stuff. Bryce raised his hand there. He also wants to talk about Coca-Cola. That's not going to happen. But we're
GitHub too.
Can you mute him, please? No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. So yeah, GitHub Actions. I haven't played around with them yet, but I know some folks have worked. There's some plugins for SAM for GitHub Actions. There's some code pipeline, different things like that. So code pipeline is pretty extensible. So you could do plugins, things like that. But man, my thing is use what works. We have folks that run entirely external pipelines, and that's fine. GitHub Actions, that's fine. Use what works. But those are the 2 things. I don't have a solid process on the GitHub Actions yet. I will. But yeah, those are the 2 things I would look at. Yeah.
We actually do use GitHub Actions for a slightly modified version of the code pipeline process that you described. So we're a GitHub shop as well as an AWS shop, and we actually don't do the unit testing at the code build step. So for our workflows, actually, we integrate GitHub Actions into the pull request process. So in order to get your code merged into the developer edge to go into the dev environment, it has to pass the unit tests at that point. And GitHub Actions will run all of the unit tests on our Lambda, on our Python code at that point. It'll block a PR if like black formatting doesn't pass, unit tests don't pass, CFN lint doesn't pass. So we actually do our validation of the code in isolation at that point.
Okay.
And then our pipelines look pretty much exactly like what Eric described, except a couple of nuanced differences. One is most everything we do are multi-region deployments. So what we actually have is we have one code build step where we feed into an environment variable. These are all the regions you need to build for, and it loops, and then it'll do one SAM build, and then it'll do a SAM package for every single region using that one build. Export a template that contains the region name in it, and then it goes into a parallel CloudFormation step where we actually skip the independent create stack set and execute stack set changes, and we just do the one action because we can still get to the change set if it fails for some reason.
Of course.
But then we just have all the regions deploy in parallel after that code build step. But
That's
we were
pretty
able to,
slick.
yeah, we were able to move the all the code validation and testing portion out of it, and then we're doing something else kind of interesting for system testing in some of our deployments. But what I've been really looking forward to doing, and I've got like 5 open tabs here for it, is to take what we're doing right now, and then that POC step function based stack set deployer that you all blogged about. I'm actually working on a POC of that, which does what I described, where you include a file with the repo that will just have the state machine loop over it and then manage stack sets.
Yes. If you need help with that, hit Rob Sutter. He's our expert on that. Yeah, that step functions is cool. What I've been seeing literally like over the last month, it's people are going, have you heard of this step functions thing?
No one's
it's starting to gain traction. It's ridiculously cool. If you haven't looked at step functions, and you can do step functions in SAM, I'm sure you can do them in serverless. You could do it. They're ridiculously cool. So I encourage you to look at that. We have another question here.
Functions. I highly recommend the serverless models because they unify a whole bunch of things, and you can do it in YAML, which is a lot nicer to read.
Yeah. Yep. I noticed you said that, and you dissed my Coke, or my Diet Pepper. So this will be our last session together, Bryson.
I'll ban him. You say the word, I'll kick him right out.
No, I'm just kidding. Whatever works, dude. I'm a fan, and this is an AWS, man. Get just frameworks. Use a framework. All right, we had a question. Any suggestions on tools, methods for debugging async issues with dependencies? Absolutely. So serverless gets kind of funky because, and like we've said, we want you to push and do your deployment or do your testing on the cloud, right? But it's like, well, how do I connect to this? One of the really cool things, there's a couple of tools out there, and I'll talk about not the SAM one first, actually. Theodo is a company, and they've made SLS, I think it's SLS tools, but it was built for serverless first. They have it for SAM now, but it will connect and tail logs as you're going through. So here, let's talk an async process for a minute, and I am going to point you to an example on go to that sessions with Sam. I actually have a show. I do a 30-minute session on this. But the idea is, let's say we have an endpoint pointing to Event Bridge, right? We're using the new HTTP APS or HTTP API direct integration with Event Bridge, right? And then we're triggering some Lambda functions on the backside. But we want to know, are those Lambdas triggering, first of all, and what are they getting? Are rule matchings working? Things like that. So I can set it all up in my development environment, and then I can tell the SLS tools to connect to that function, and then I can just start pushing some data through there. I can use a load testing, and I'll talk about that in a second. There's another tool called on SAM. It's just called SAM logs, and that'll do that. And if you're a Stacker user, another really cool tool. If you're a Stacker user, they have I think it's called I don't remember but they have a command that'll do that as well. Do you guys have one for serverless?
Yeah, we sure do. We have you can just run SLS logs with the function name and stream them straight to your machine. Yep. Some really cool stuff we're working on now is we just call dev mode, which sort of harnesses and marries the idea of the individual developer stack with the streaming log function. So you can just run serverless dev in any of your serverless projects, and it can actually deploy a stack for you on a stage specific to whatever stage you pass in, and it will start streaming logs to your machine. We have a bunch of really cool stuff that's coming out for that, like how to interact with that in sort of a Postman-like experience. But we're very much heading that same direction, and that's what we're using every day internally as we're working on this. So big +1, anything that lets you kind of tail those logs and debug really quickly. That's a huge improvement to my development experience. I've got like a YouTube video I'll post quick here that kind of shows you a demo.
Yeah. The reality, CloudWatch is great. It's powerful, but to go and have to refresh that and hunt down your log stream, things like that, that's not fun. So same logs, the same thing. You just tell it the function name, or you can do a stack name and then logical function name. So yeah, those are some tools that I would highly recommend becoming really familiar with, because the more and more the reality of serverless, and AJ, you can tell me to shut up when we're out of time, but if you look at serverless, you think about building serverless. The reality of serverless more and more is becoming that you are chaining managed services together. You're writing less and less code every time. I talk about this in a blog called Storage First Applications. And the proof in the pudding, or what I say, and this is the truth, and I've made some jokes about it, but there's truth. The most brittle part of an application every time is going to be my code. Now, that doesn't mean me over other developers, although probably so. But the code is the thing that we're changing all the time. We're iterating against and changing things like that. But if we can take advantage of, and what I see developers still is, they're writing their own retry logic. They're writing their own, save logic if something fails, versus using the built-in retry logic, built-in DLQs, different things like that. So more and more, what we're all about is chaining these. Here's HTTP API, connecting directly to EventBridge. I don't know if y'all saw it. I have a blog out there where I wrote an entire URL shortener with nothing but, well, it uses CloudFront in front of it, but it's using API Gateway REST and DynamoDB with direct integration. Now, it's all in VTL, and it was really painful, but it is faster than snot. I mean, I don't even know how fast that is, but it's really fast, and it's pretty, it either does or doesn't work. And I've gone through all the testing. VTL is a very configuration thing. So it either works or doesn't. So once it's working, it's just cruising. And we're seeing more and more of this. And at Amazon, we're looking at making that easier. And HTTP API direct integration is a great example. All that to say, as developers, we need to know how to sync. We need to know how to do async debugging. And so I really encourage you to really wrap your head around these tools. That was a really long answer, but there you go.
Definitely a good answer.
X-Ray, yes, Bryson, good call. Yeah, X-Ray is a great tool. Yeah, and X-Ray is getting more and more. A lot of stuff's being added. I'm sorry, Jay, I think I talked right over you. But yeah, X-Ray is another tool that I would use. CloudWatch Insights. Yeah.
There's a lot we can talk about on the serverless kind of debugging side of things. A lot of what I try to do is I just want to echo some of what Eric said. I find a lot of the times when I help folks kind of operationalize and evangelize serverless inside of their organizations, whether it's, a startup or a Fortune 100 or whatever, we find a lot of folks reinventing the wheel that they're used to reinventing. And I really want to advocate folks to leverage. Yeah. And it's common for us because as developers, we see a problem and we sort of fix it, not necessarily knowing full well that it may have been solved in ways we hadn't thought of, or it may have been averted by decisions that we haven't yet chosen to make. So with serverless, there's still a lot of things you don't know until you know, right? Like the unknown unknowns. And it's definitely worthwhile to spend some time doing some Googling, and you'll find a lot of these things like, the retry discussion that Eric brought up is a great one. Like how, what happens when my Lambda fails? Just a broad, right? Like, what happens when my API doesn't work? How can I handle that? Because there are a lot of ways to mitigate and to retry and to, redirect that information flow that lives sort of in the minutia of the infrastructure of the way your Lambda function interacts with other managed services. Sure. But we do strive, generally speaking, as like a serverless first, group, and like as a personal service first developer, I really want to manage less and just build more of my product. So you want to learn and leverage these services. And I think that's how folks can be most successful when it comes to like the adoption and also like handling these sorts of edge cases. So To sum it up, I would not recommend writing your own scheduler functions. I would not recommend writing your own retry logics. Leverage the managed services. And if you need those features, they do exist in other services offered by not only AWS, but every major cloud that you can find offers some form of usually a general case of solving that problem.
That's right. That's right. And really smarter people than me doing it. I did have a question. Said, are you speaking at reInvent? I am speaking at reInvent. I do not know the schedule yet. I'm doing 2 sessions. One is a 400 level on where I will be actually talking about HTTP APIs. It's called HTTP APIs Beyond the Proxy. So it's understanding, and it's going to talk a lot about this direct integration. It's going to talk about observability, enhanced observability. It's a 30-minute session, so I don't get to go as deep as I want to, but yeah. And then the second one I'm doing is a very 200 level of where do I start? I want to do serverless, and it's going to be SAM. That's a SAM one. So, all right, thanks. How about in a Lambda function, e.g. AWS service.promise does not work? Okay, so one thing, now they don't have it for Node, but I would mention Power Tools as well. They have it for Python and Java, so that doesn't help you at all, Bill, and I realize that. But I did want to not forget to mention those. Also, the Lambda Power Tuner is another one to see how your Lambda function's doing. But as far as in the you're logging like crazy, you can debug straight in if you're using Visual Studio Code. One of the things to help with because I mean, who of us doesn't catch a promise right? I never catch the promises right. Now, one thing to know with HTTP API that this doesn't answer your question, but to throw it out is it's a little easier. You can just return the promise. You can do it's a little easier with HTTP API, and we do some of the logic for you. But I would use for direct debugging for step-by-step breakpoint debugging. You could set up a debugger in Visual Studio Code. And it's particular about how your application's set up. But if you follow the one I was showing where each is in its own folder, it works like a charm. So, or you could create the application right in Visual Studio Code. The Visual Studio Code tool set will help you debug those and do line breaks and such. So.
Good questions, group. Anything left? I know we're at time now. I don't want to hold Eric too long, but I want to make sure everyone has the information they need to kind of go forward until our next meetup.
I have a question, but it's not regarding this meetup.
Sure, go ahead.
I like what Bryson, that's your name, sorry, said about the GitHub Actions. I'm new to this group, and I'm from Ottawa, Canada. Sorry. Yeah. But is there a possibility to request a CI/CD serverless approach, like
yes,
what people are using tools?
I super second that. I'm so seconding that.
We can definitely.
I come to that too.
I would like to ask a lot of what Bryson is doing, but there's no time. But
you betcha.
Yeah, me too. Bryson, you should give a talk. Thank you.
Yeah, please.
I was Bryson,
because we just started on GitHub Actions in our company because we just got it for our enterprise license. I don't know why. So we're starting to build up in that area. So it's good to learn from what people are doing already.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, Bryson, if you want to give a talk, or we have a few things coming up, but I think we could definitely make room for that. Otherwise, there's so much out there, especially when it comes to CI/CD and kind of best practice, that I think everyone here would love to share. So we can get some content like that to you guys for sure.
So I just posted a link. Now it's not going to be what Bryce is going to show, and this is very, very high level. But if you're new to CI/CD on serverless, this will give you concepts. This is a conceptual, hey, this is what's out there. Here's how you kind of run it, that kind of idea. But if you're trying to figure some of that, then you can. This is from reInvent last year. So I'm wearing a ridiculously large shirt with Peter Sabarski's head on it. So it's fully entertaining. So there you go.
All right, that's awesome. Thanks again. This has been a really, really enjoyable talk. I love the conversation. The presentation was fantastic. Eric, thanks so much for taking the time. We really appreciate your time. Really looking
thanks for having me.
reInvent, man.
Yeah, thoroughly enjoy this. I can't wait till we can all, hang out in person. But until then, let's keep doing this. And I'd love to come back sometime. So
Absolutely. We'd love to have you.
yeah,
That's great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much again for talking. I had this recorded. Eric and I are going to sync up after this and figure out who's got what end of the conversation and make sure we can get something good uploaded, and I'll share it to the group. Folks, thanks for joining us. Next month, I believe it's like the 16th of December. That Monday, the second or third week, we're having Ryan Jones, Serverless Guru, talking about the business case for serverless. If you've not heard of Ryan or you haven't heard of the Serverless Guru, really think you should give it a rip. He's got so much great content, and he has this really unique ability of kind of joining the high level business and product case to the serverless solutions. Fantastic guy, really, really sharp. A lot of great things we can learn from him as a group, and I'm really excited to have it. And Eric, thanks again so much. Awesome talk. I'm going to be number one in your audience, raising my hand for this virtual reInvent. Can't wait.
Thank you. Thanks all. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thanks.
Thanks.
Bye.
See you later.
Thank you.